Hello, I'm Louis CK, and thanks for watching this collection of my short films. These are most of the short films I've ever made. I like making short films. Short films are always fun to do, and you can do anything you want in a short film because it doesn't have the weight of a feature where every moment has to serve the entire film. If you have a weird little idea, you can just go out and make a short film about it, and people can watch it for a short time and then move on to whatever the next thing is they're doing in their lives. And so I just always encourage people to make short films because it's the one thing in film that you can always do. There's people laying all over the streets who are great, qualified, and talented filmmakers, directors of photography and editors who have nothing to do, and they're always eager to jump on a project with somebody who's into it. So for those of you out there that are thinking of making shorts and have never made one, you should just go ahead and do it. The first short on this collection is called Ice Cream, and this is the second short film I ever made, and it's probably my favorite because it was the simplest. I wrote it in about 15 minutes and shot it in, I think, 2 days, almost entirely in my apartment and in Laura Keitlinger's apartment. Laura Keitlinger is the lead woman in the film, and also Grand Central Station. Although we weren't allowed to plug in anything to the walls in Grand Central because of electricians' unions. We certainly didn't have any union electricians on that shoot. And we used Laura's manager's baby, played all three babies, and we had fun shooting for 2 short days, and I think it took me another 3 days to edit it, and there it was. And it's probably the most successful short I've ever made, and maybe, to me, in my mind, better than even some of the features I've done. Brunch is the one with Rick Shapiro in drag, dressed like an old lady, hanging out with other old ladies. And the original idea was to have him just sit and have brunch with these other old ladies and just to improvise and just to see what would happen. And unfortunately, nothing happened. They kind of sat there and no one really said much. So instead, we kind of had each woman say a few things that was pleasant, like good and oh, that's interesting. And then I just put the camera on Rick and he went on, totally improvised for about an hour, just saying the most horrible, filthy, vile things that climbed into his head. And so that's how that came about. And that was shot just handheld with Paul Kessner, the director of photography, who's shot all of these shorts, running around and trying to catch everything. Hello There is the one with the guy with a tape recorder who talks through the tape recorder, and the guy who plays him is Ron Lynch, and that's a character that Ron created called Felix Foob, and he plays Felix Foob on stage. He's a stand-up comedian and a very old friend of mine, and he so I asked him to do the role for the short, and we came up with this little story about the guy going through his day saying hello to people through his tape recorder, and then going to this corporation kind of conference room where everybody's talking through the tape recorders. And so that's all there really is to say. Oh, the conference room on Hello There is the writers' meeting room at the Conan O'Brien show at the NBC 30 Rockefeller Center. That's the only little tidbit about that. The Legend of Willie Brown is the little jazz film about the trumpet player who goes on stage, and you saw what happened there. And actually, that's something that I used to do as a bit, as a comedian in a club in New York City. I used to come on. I used to be introduced as a great jazz trumpet player, and I'd come on and I'd light a cigarette while the band's playing, and I'd act really cool, and then I'd be terrible. So that's where that came from. And let's see, The Hijacker was shot on the Staten Island ferry, which basically was surprisingly easy to get permission to shoot there. We just all paid the 75-cent fare, and we just stayed on the ferry. And we went back and forth, and Rick Shapiro ran around acting like a lunatic. I think the ending to that one is a little disappointing, but that's sometimes the hard thing about short films is coming up with a satisfying ending without it being too much of a cornball punchline. The letter V, the star of the letter V is Robert Smigel, who some of you might know who that is because he makes all the cartoons for Saturday Night Live, and he also created the show TV Funhouse, and he's also the voice and creator of Triumph the Insult Dog on Conan and all these things. And Robert was the head writer at Conan, and he hired me when I was there as a writer. So we were friends from way back, and so I asked him to do this thing, and he did it. And other than that, the guy, there's another guy in the film who's plays a valet parker, and that's Nick Smith, who was the editor of pretty much all of these short films that you're watching. The next film is called Which One Is Crazy? Or Guess Which Person Is Crazy? And now this one was, here's the thing, the films, 6 of these films, Brunch, Hello There, Legend of Willie Brown, Hijacker, Letter V, and Guess Which Person Is Crazy, were made for, Howie Mandel used to have a show on Showtime called Sunny Skies, which was a sketch comedy show, and he hired me to make 6 short films, sent me money and paid me to make 6 short films for his show, and it was great. Howie was very nice. He gave me all this money to make the films, didn't really ask me what I was doing. And so we had to make these 6 shorts, and I only really had 5 good ideas. And I only had a week to shoot all 6 shorts. So in the end, we scrambled and got all 5, and I didn't have the 6th idea. So the day that we shot Letter V, Robert and I just sat on a park bench and just sort of came up with this weird idea about Guess Which Person Is Crazy, and we just sort of did it, and you see what the result is. And also, that's also the editor, Nick Smith, is the guy that comes in at the end of that film. So we really just made that one to stay within compliance of the contract for Howie's show. Then there's Ugly Revenge, which is a little short that I made when I was hosting a show called Shortcuts. It's this show that's syndicated on PBS that I hosted, where I used to talk about short films and then show them. And so on this film, what we decided to do was to make a short film during the show. So you'd see a little bit of me directing the short film, and then I would show another short. And then at the end of the show, we showed this little film that I had made. And the idea was to show how easy it is to make a film if you really want to, and how little you need. So I made Ugly Revenge with, I brought my little manual typewriter, and I had a Bolex camera, a wind-up Bolex camera, and no sound. And I wrote the film on the set, on my typewriter, on the pages, and had 2 actors, or 4 actors actually, and just shot it in the meatpacking district in New York City, just on various corners with the Bolex. And then we all went into a van with a Nagra sound recorder, and we recorded all the dialogue afterwards, and then edited it together, and that's the result. So it's a very minimalist little film, but it's kind of charming. And also Ugly Revenge, the last part of it, where the 2 guys are having their showdown, and they're standing closer and closer and closer together through the cutting, that little trick. I stole that from myself and used it in the second feature film that I made called Pootie Tang. There's a scene towards the end where Pootie Tang and Dirty D, the bad guy, I did the exact same thing, cutting them together. And so that's an example of how you can use short films to come up with ideas for if you're later get to make feature films. It's kind of like a sketchbook. If you look at some artists' sketchbooks, or like Leonardo, and you see studies for some of the paintings that are now famous, that he just would do a study, maybe in pencil, and then later, so sometimes short films can be used for that. Also in Ugly Revenge is Ron Lynch, who is in Hello There, and he's in some other stuff. Oh, who else is in Hello There? Oh, Tommy Blacha is the bad guy, and he's a writer for the Conan O'Brien Show, and Amy Poehler, who you might recognize from Upright Citizens Brigade. Very funny person. And the last film on this collection is Caesar Salad. And this is the first short film that I ever made. and it's 27 minutes long, which is way too long for a short, and it's a crazy, sprawling film. But it's the first film I ever made, and I think the way it happened was that I'd been saving money because I was thinking of going to NYU's summer film program, and I wanted to learn how to make films. I didn't know how film worked. I had made a lot of little video shorts with video cameras, but I had never worked on film, and I was really afraid of it. And but instead, I decided to take the money that I had and some money that my mother donated, and make a short film and just learn that way. And I met a guy named Paul Kessner, who was the director of photography, who really taught me how to make films through the making of this film, and I worked with him for forever after that. And but anyway, Caesar Salad is about a bunch of people working at a nightclub and what happens to them off stage. And it's I have a hard time watching it now, I think, because it was my first short, and it's kind of crazy. But there's some people in it that became curiously famous later. Ray Romano plays the cop, and so does Dave Attell, who's another funny comedian. And Caroline Reyes plays this guy's mother, and some other folks too. But so Caesar Salad also, it was shot inside of the comic strip in New York, a comedy club. We turned that into Caesars, and they let me they just for nothing. I think I paid the doorman to come and open early. I paid him like $50, and we would turn the comic strip into Caesars every day during the day. And that was a film that cost me something like $23,000 to make. And I just had no idea how. I didn't have a producer or anything, and I would just take cash out of the bank every day and just buy pizza, whatever anybody needed, and just shell money out, and it just went all out the window. So that was $23,000, and that film never really it won a couple of awards, but it never really went anywhere. And in contrast, Ice Cream, my second film, where I had learned to have a little discipline, I think cost me a total of about $5,000 to $10,000 to make, and it still plays on IFC and Bravo and whatnot. So, so that was Caesar Salad. Anyway, those are all the shorts, and I hope you enjoy them. And again, I hope if you're a young filmmaker that you make short films, and use video cameras or whatever you have to learn the language of how to make films. But then don't be afraid to use film, because it looks daunting and expensive, and those crews look like very intimidating bunches of people that it's a very closed society, but it really isn't. And they're very open to people coming and saying, I have an idea and I have $15, and you can make a short. So enjoy the films, and thanks for watching, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.